Here we go again, as they say. Introduction to Doris, take 2. On the videos coming up, we're going to look at a few aspects of a car. One is the construction of the front wing, and a few tips on actually looking at the wing if you go to view a car and what to check for. Second stage would be to dive a little into how the sills go together on an imp. Quite important because a lot of people actually confuse the front and the rear wing as being part of the sill. They are and they aren't. They tend to actually cover the actual structure underneath. So we'll be digging a little bit into those. There'll be some cutaways. I have my Imp super duper high-tech testing tool in my hand while I'm doing it. You need to keep an eye out for that one. Every workshop should have one of those, just so you can hit the imp where it hurts. And if you look at how the things go together, and if you're going to look to buy an imp, if you're not going to go along to one of the local area centres for the club, then Tim Morgan actually does a book called The Buyer's Guide for Your Hillman Imp. It covers looking at these spots when going to look at a car in case there's anything being dummied up. In this case, we've actually shown you what's underneath, so you know what to expect and you can make your judgment yourself if it's good or bad. So, on to the videos.
Hi there, welcome back to Project Doris. As you can see, we've now got a dry workshop now that the new roof's on. Unfortunately, the lighting's not exactly there yet. It will happen. However, I thought it was time to get back to the shell. The original footage that we shot for the various aspects of the bodyworks and checks, what to expect, etc. That unfortunately fell foul to loss of audio due to the microphone I used. So I'll try once again to either do it closer up or actually just use the built-in microphone. Not convinced the rest of it is entirely reliable. So let's have a look around the corners of the bodywork again in a bit better light and see what we can see. Most of the checks is actually covered under a publication, Buyer's Guide to the Hillman Imp, and that was authored by Tim Morgan. It's available through a very popular mail order retailer, or online retailer these days, should I say. And if you're looking to buy an imp and you don't know too much about it, your two choices are buy the book and swap up on it, or your very best option is to find your local imp club area centre. These are spread across the country. The chances are there is one within driving distance of you. That way you'll get to look at the cars, but more importantly you'll get to meet the people that actually maintain the cars and keep them on the road. These people have invaluable knowledge if you're going to look at a car and can tell you exactly what to expect. But just in case you don't feel like popping along, we'll still cover all of these aspects here and wish you the very best of luck if you go to buy an imp. Okay, first, retake of the clip covering the Hillman Imp wing. Now the Hillman Imp wing, chances are you will have to repair one of these. If we look what's actually available in this one, we have rot at the bottom. Round the arch doesn't look too bad except these bubbles. But when you come round here, this is what the bubbles could be hiding. And as you can see, there's already been a bit of filler in a few places and a couple of coats of paint. We'll cover the sill later. But other than the outside of the wing, you also have the scuttle section. Now this scuttle section, I deliberately took away the top layer of paint here because it was bubbled. Now, this has actually rotted in here. You can't really see what the sections are like underneath, but underneath this part here is actually the top of your A-pillar, which runs down here. Now, there is no actual weld joint in here, it's just sealer. So the wing isn't actually attached. Your wing attachments along the top are on your front panel here, some rivets here from that return plate. As you can see, if you take a closer look, there is what those little bubbles in the scuttle normally hide, which is a bit more rot behind. So even although it may be tempting to leave that alone, you will regret it. You'll see a very, very small pinhole here. So like I've done on other cars, if you look up the build threads for what we call George, which is JDL 889F, you'll actually see that I have cut the scuttle here. It removes quite easily and gives you good access to get in there, and if the part that you've taken off is not actually in that bad a shape, it will actually go back on very, very nicely and saves you shaping a new part. Just beware down this section is actually lead loaded, so cutting in here, you need to really watch out for lead droplets, hot lead. It can be quite nasty. Now, there are several spot welds down here, as well as the arch and the seam down the front of the scuttle. I mention this only because at some point you're going to have a serious think and decide whether you want to put in an arch section, which will cover you here and down to here and below. It is actually a very, very nice panel. It covers a lot. However, they're not really for the faint-hearted to actually put in. If you look at the previous builds that I've done, you'll see several of those arch sections that I have fitted, and I can tell you now that it's a fair amount of work. And I say a fair amount of work because the welding is the easy bit. What you've got to do, rubbing down the white stuff on top to get a nice finish, that's not so easy. And if you're like myself, I don't particularly like working with the white stuff. I'm not particularly good at it. I'll get there, but I'm not particularly good at it, so I don't enjoy it. A full wing section, if you put it in perspective, you might be jumping from £150 to £450. That wing section is going to be complete. It's going to be everything you see here, and no white stuff, or very little white stuff. Cutting it out, to cut out your arch section, you have to make a very, very tidy cut all the way around here for your seam, which you will likely want to butt weld in. To do that, the cuts really have to be precise. You really have to get it clamped in place properly. You need to prep all the inner arch, which you will need to do anyway for a full wing. But time-wise, I find putting a full wing in is not only a lot quicker, it also gives a much better job. And all I can say is, if you're like myself, you happen to be getting on a few years, time is the one thing that you don't get back. So do you want a 12-month project, spend 4 or 5 weekends on putting a wheel arch section in, or do you want to spend a half a day and put a wing in and manage to finish the project rather than being sick most of the way through and leave it for another year? Well, we'll get back to that in a minute. I'm just going to turn the car over so we can get a look at the intersection. Oh well, it's turning these cars over can sometimes be like removing the sofa from your living room. There's always change, coins, kids' toys, all manner of bric-a-brac living down the back of the cushions that you hear rattling when you turn it over. Imps are no different. The nooks and crannies that you find coins, kids' toys, pencils, all manner of things that, you know, the cars get used for, because these cars have had lives. They have lived. Not all of them were single person cars, a lot of them were family cars, so yeah, small toys and things are quite common to find. We'll probably find a few of those later. Arch-wise, you can see here how the structures are. There's a small return in here, which has a seam from this panel to here and to the valance. We'll get back to the valance in the middle. This is actually the vent pipe for the fuel tank. Which we see here. So regardless what you do before you start welding and cutting and things, you probably want to get that out. Inner arch-wise, you have this in and a return. You can see the tulips here, which is spot welded along. And if you run your finger along, you can feel the spot welds. Now, as you run your finger along and you feel the dimples where it's been spot welded, you can be reasonably sure that it's not been fudged up that much. I don't know if we can see across the light to see any. No, we can't. If you find that's totally smooth, then there's something fishy. But it's when we come down here, sorry, cobwebs. The car was host to a small ecosystem of spiders for a period of time by the looks of it. All of this metal here is probably very, very weak and will be replaced. But when the arch comes down and gets to this section, behind here is almost a direct drain from that scuttle section at the top. So any person there, eventually it'll come down, clogs up round about here, and that'll increase your rot. This section here, on top, you can see the layers of rust that have built up. So the chances are this metal section from here all the way down is toast. However, we will be replacing this section almost entirely with a new inner section. There's a rolled beaded seal where the two panels are joined round about this section that you will see here, and we will make that our joint place. So just before it, we can't replicate the effect of that weld, but what we can do is we can cut a little bit in if we can, butt weld it to hide it, and that will save the seam. So when we go to paint, then it should be pretty similar looking to what it was at the factory. Here, if I can get the light, you can see inside, this is part of your step sill, which is gone. That step sill normally sits underneath here. The wing comes down and covers over the top, so you've actually got a space here where it's double skinned. Design wise, not that bad until things start to fill up in here and it no longer drains. And then, as you can see, it will start creeping up and keep the damp in. Overall, there's what we have inside. We'll get to the sills later, and when we cut that out, we're really going to have a fun time. We need to put a dust sheet down for that one. There's a joke very, very often on the Facebook groups, on the Imp forums, on hillmanimp.org, that when we take an Imp to bits, we sweep it off the floor. And especially with some of these cars, that's pretty much close to the truth. So, on to the next panel. So, on to sills. We touched on the sills with end of the A-pillar comments. the actual final skin on the A-pillar is actually what closes off your sill, and we'll show where that closes off in a minute. One thing of note is that a lot of people confuse the wings, both front and rear, on an Imp with being part of the outer sill. Actually they aren't. The outer sill is actually shaped like this. So if we go from the side we were just at, you can see it steps in here to the flanges at the end, which attach to your A-pillar section. It then has a full length until it gets to here, where it once again steps in and then tapers off to the end at the back wheel arch. Now this step section, we go from the front, we should see a small seam here where the two panels join, which should be very, very similar to this. And you will see, if I put some light on the subject, the small seam I'm speaking about here, where it steps in. And if I remove the inner wing, you can see how that section looks. Now, this part up here is actually this part, and you can see where this is now completely rotted away. Primarily that will have been due to the outer wing coming over the top here, which is the missing section and outside skin. And when they go together, you will see a gap through the hole. But if you take a quick look on the inside, you will see the cavity. Now, it doesn't take much for that to be filled with, well, just about anything, including rust, to actually block up and retain the moisture in there. Now, here looks very, very daunting. It's typical Imp rot, if you ask me. So if we go along and we get to here, this is where the rear wing should come down. Now, I'm not 100% sure if this is a cover sill, and by the looks of it, I think it is. I had a joke the other week there with Colin Rooney that I was going to look at an Imp. He said, best of luck, and my reply to that was, well, you know the score, Colin. I'll take my multi-purpose Imp testing tool and I can actually hit it where it hurts, so we'll soon see if it's good. But there's no filler there, so that's one continuous section. So there's been a cover sill put over the top of this, rather than a normal step sill, which if we look inside, we can't even see the end of. It's completely rotted away. So structure wise, you know, this is actually a very, very dangerous car. You can see where it should have been. So here we have, here is a cover sill. Here, that skin is what is left of the outer of the inner wing, and this is what's left of the top of the step sill. So overall, end of this one is absolutely rotten as a pear. This is meant to be a box, it comes down. There's meant to be an inner sill, or should I say a middle sill, all the way along to here. as a box, and this comes down to meet it. Now this is what the section should look like. That's the section I hammered at and said there should be a split. This is right at your B-pillar. This is what should be behind it, and this box section simply steps in here to allow that rear wing to cover over the top and meet down here at the middle sill. This box section, which is structural, is actually missing in this car, and that's a major oversight for whoever actually put it back together. And that step should be here. So if you don't see an imp with a small section coming down here, question what's happened. It may be innocently enough that someone's filled it in and smoothed it out because they like the look. However, it could just as easy be that they fitted a one length cover section on the car instead, and actually that's what it hides underneath. Never trust shiny paint, and if someone says they've restored the car, ask for the pictures of how it was done. There's no shame in it, and if your gut tells you that there's something fishy, walk away. Walk away. So rear wing, you can get sections if you have got to change the sills on their own and you're not doing the same as I'm doing with the back wings. You can get a section that's cut here to repair the outer wing, which then gives you access to get in and do your full cover sill. But we'll close up on the sill and that step section at the B pillar. That section here terminates here, right at that inner wheel tub. So we're going to have a fair bit of work to do here as well.